In the cold void of space above Earth, a mighty alien warship hovered in orbit, its sleek, dark hull reflecting the stars as it glided effortlessly through the vast expanse of the universe. Below the blue planet was a mere speck in the distance to the invaders, yet it held the promise of conquest and the defeat of humanity's last defenders aboard the ship. One human soldier remained captured, the lone survivor of a failed human resistance effort on Earth. He had fought with unwavering courage until the end, but now he was imprisoned in the bowels of the alien vessel. His weapons stripped, his body battered, his uniform torn. He was no longer a soldier, but a trophy the aliens believed their prize. The soldier stood silent in a holding cell, a small grim smile tugging at his lips. Despite the overwhelming odds, the invaders had underestimated him from the moment he was captured. Their mocking tones echoed through the walls as they spoke of his people's primitive technology and hopeless resistance. They had broken his comrades, they had broken his world. They would soon break him too. The leader of the alien forces, a towering creature with smooth obsidian skin and 4 glowing eyes, stepped forward and addressed the soldier in a language he could not understand, but the tone was unmistakable, mocking, condescending. The alien leader circled him, slowly analyzing the human with cruel amusement. The soldier stood straight, his eyes locked onto the leader's glowing gaze without a flicker of fear. The leader growled in amusement, something that sounded like a laugh, but was devoid of humor in his language. The words were clear to the soldier. It was clear the alien did not see him as a threat. No one in the ship did. The soldier felt the weight of the disdainful eyes upon him from every corner of the chamber. Alien officers and soldiers alike observed his every move. Their chatter filled the air as they laughed about how easily they had captured him and how primitive the humans were. They spoke of his race as little more than insects, and how their advanced technology and superior might had made the human defense forces look foolish. Their laughter was like a chorus of derision. He was less than a curiosity to them, just a fleeting moment of entertainment. Their commander moved closer, running a long clawed finger along the soldier's cheek, inspecting his face with a strange sort of pity. It was clear they had no idea who they were dealing with. The soldier knew that his life hung by a thread. The alien forces were powerful. Their technology was far beyond human comprehension. But he also knew something the invaders didn't. Their belief that they could break him was their fatal mistake. He had been trained to endure, to resist, and to think beyond the walls of his cell. He could wait patiently. He could learn. He could strike when they least expected it. The alien leader began to speak again, this time with more authority. It barked orders in its native tongue, and the others stepped back. The human was to be held for further examination and eventual study. The soldier did not flinch or cower. Instead, he took a slow breath and let the sound of their mocking words wash over him. They had no idea just how much they had underestimated humanity. The alien commander's orders were clear. The human soldier was to be left in isolation for further interrogation and observation. The walls of his cell hummed with energy as the door slid shut behind him, sealing him in darkness. But the soldier wasn't concerned about the darkness. He had been in worse places. He had endured worse. The cell was a prison, but it was also his opportunity, his chance to gather information and figure out how to escape. The mockery from the aliens echoed in his mind, their words still fresh, their laughter still ringing in his ears. But he knew he could not afford to focus on their derision. He had to stay calm. He had to stay sharp. Every piece of information was vital. No matter how trivial it seemed, the ship was unlike anything he had seen before. Its vast corridors were lined with alien technology and machinery that seemed to pulse with life, as if the ship itself were a living being. The soldier had caught glimpses of the crew's movements, their patrol patterns, the layout of the ship. Every little detail was burned into his mind. The problem was he couldn't get to any of it, yet his cell was sealed tight with technology. He had no hope of understanding, at least not yet. But that was fine. Time was on his side. They thought he was nothing more than an insignificant human. The perfect underestimation. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had given him access to their systems, though he couldn't interact with them directly. The ship's layout and controls were all linked to the central control room, where the most valuable information was stored. The soldier's mind was sharp. He'd spent hours observing the alien technology, and while it was beyond human understanding on the surface, there were patterns beneath those patterns. He could see the logic of their operations. There were gaps and flaws in their systems too small to be noticed by the alien eyes that ran them, but not by him. After a few moments of silence, the soldier knelt on the cold floor of his cell and began to work with what little he had in the dark. He began to use his fingers to scratch and tap at the walls in a rhythm that wasn't random, it was calculated. His mind raced as he made sense of the sound, the way the cell's energy flow changed. When he pressed certain parts of the walls, some areas hummed while others barely responded. It was a map of weaknesses and vulnerabilities. It didn't take long for him to find a small patch of the wall that emitted a strange low buzz when touched. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started with. It was a part of the ship's internal power grid, a system the aliens likely thought was too trivial to secure properly. Yet it was here that the soldier found his first break. The soldier continued to tap away at the walls as he pieced together the information he had gathered, methodically calculating his next moves. In the silence of the cell, he smiled again. But this time there was no arrogance, only the cold certainty of a predator preparing for the hunt. His mind was alive with possibilities. The aliens had no idea what they had just unleashed. They thought they were playing with a fragile human soldier, when in reality they were playing with a force far more dangerous than they realized, and they would regret underestimating him soon enough. The hum of the cell's energy grid was almost hypnotic as the soldier continued to tap at the wall, tracing patterns with his fingertips over and over again, each movement precise, his mind working at a speed the aliens could never have predicted. He wasn't just wasting time. No, the soldier was studying the flow of energy within the walls. He could feel the subtle shifts and fluctuations. Every minute detail of the alien technology was being stored in his mind piece by piece. With each touch, he began to understand how the energy coursed through the cell, how the walls communicated with the larger systems of the ship, and most importantly, how to break it all down. He knew he couldn't do it all at once, that would be too risky, but he could make small changes at first, tiny adjustments that would be just enough to shift the balance to his advantage. In a moment of quiet, he pulled back his hand and listened carefully. There was a soft click. The cell's light flickered for a moment, and the familiar low hum that had filled the air now felt slightly off, just enough to notice, but not enough to be alarming to the aliens. That was exactly what he wanted. The soldier had found a weakness, and now it was time to exploit it. The cell's internal power grid was linked to the main energy systems of the ship, and while the aliens thought their systems were airtight, they had overlooked the small chance that a human soldier might be able to use his senses and instincts to notice something others would miss. The wall wasn't just a barrier, it was a conduit, a piece of a larger system, and the soldier had found its flaw in the system. If he could continue to work unnoticed, he could eventually gain access to more critical components, even perhaps the central control room. But for now he needed to be patient. The alien crew had no idea what he was up to. As they continued to mock him from time to time, they would throw insults his way as they passed his cell, or send in their junior officers to taunt him. None of them seemed concerned by his silence, his passive resistance. But that was part of his plan. Let them think he was broken, let them believe they had won. It would make his escape all the sweeter. He had time on his side, and he would need it to fully understand the alien technology around him. What he had learned so far was just the beginning. The ship was a vast network of interconnected systems, and while the soldier had no formal knowledge of alien engineering, his instincts told him that everything had a pattern. Every piece of technology, no matter how advanced, followed certain principles. He just had to learn to see them. His mind buzzed with possibilities as he slowly adjusted the energy flows inside his cell. With each tap of his fingers, he felt the walls grow weaker, more malleable, and after what seemed like hours, the light flickered again. And this time the soldier knew that it was his opening. The power was fluctuating more than it should be, and now he could hear the faint hum of the door's locking mechanism, shifting slightly out of sync. It wasn't enough to open the door yet, but it was the first sign that his plan was working. The soldier let out a silent breath and stood up. His body ached, but the pain was nothing compared to the thrill of discovery. He was ready to make his move, but he knew that haste would be his enemy. Now was the time for precision, patience. was his weapon. He only needed a little more time. The soldier could feel the tension building inside him as the energy flows in his cell continued to shift subtly with each calculated movement. Every adjustment was like a step closer to freedom. He could hear the murmurs of alien voices in the distance, but they seemed distant like echoes from another world. They had no idea what was happening right under their noses. Their laughter and mockery had slowly faded away with time, replaced by silence and a growing sense of complacency among the crew. They thought him weak. They thought him broken. They had no idea how close they were to the edge of a nightmare. The soldier's senses were sharp. Every hum, every click, every shift in the ship's energy was noted. The air in his cell felt different now. The temperature had dropped slightly. The walls felt colder. His mind raced with calculations as he pressed his hands against the walls again, working faster now, testing the limits of his control. The small adjustments were starting to compound, each change feeding into the next, and soon he could hear the hum of the energy grid fluctuating rapidly. His patience was paying off, but now he needed the right moment, when the guard shift changed, when the next patrol would pass by his cell, and when the power grid would be at its weakest. That was the moment when everything would fall into place. He let the time pass. He had become used to the strange rhythm of the ship. The alien patrols came and went like clockwork, their steps in the corridor outside predictable and consistent. The soldier could hear the heavy footfalls of the aliens as they patrolled the length of the hall, a constant reminder of his captivity, but also a reminder of the carefully constructed plan unfolding in his mind. He had watched them long enough to know how they moved, how they communicated, how they thought. The alien crew believed in their superiority with their advanced technology, their superior strength and intellect, but the soldier knew something that they did not. They had underestimated the power of human ingenuity, the human will to survive and adapt, and now they were about to see the full force of that underestimation. He checked the small changes he had made to the power grid. Everything was ready. The moment of opportunity was near. The door to his cell had a locking mechanism that he had slowly and methodically tampered with. The energy flow in the walls had shifted just enough to create a weak spot in the lock. If he could access it at the right moment, he could override it and break free. But there was a catch. The locking system was sophisticated and designed to prevent any tampering, so he needed to be quick and precise in the few seconds before the system corrected itself. If he hesitated for even a moment, the door would lock back into place, and he would have to start over. He wasn't going to waste this chance. As the alien patrols drew near, the soldier held his breath. His fingers hovered over the walls, just waiting for the power fluctuations to reach their peak. He could hear the guards chatting with one another, their voices growing louder and then receding as they approached his cell. He closed his eyes and listened for the exact moment when the ship's hum shifted, the door's lock releasing its tension ever so slightly. That was his cue. The soldier's fingers danced across the wall at lightning speed, moving with practiced precision. The lock gave a faint click as the power grid pulsed one final time. The door was now unlocked. His heart raced, but he remained calm. He had done it. He was free. The door creaked open with a soft hiss. The soldier stepped into the corridor, his breath steady, his senses alert. Every muscle in his body was honed for this moment. He could feel the cold metal floor beneath his boots as he moved silently through the shadows, his eyes quickly adjusting to the dim lighting of the alien ship. The ship's corridors stretched out before him like a labyrinth, but he had studied their layout long enough to know exactly where to go. The soldiers had underestimated him in so many ways, but the one mistake that would cost them the most was their failure to recognize just how resourceful a human could be when pushed to the edge. With a quick glance over his shoulder, the soldier confirmed that the door to his cell had closed behind him with a faint click, as if locking itself back into place. But he didn't have time to worry about that now. He had to stay ahead of the patrols and the ship's security systems, which he knew were highly advanced and unforgiving. He moved swiftly, ducking into the nearest shadow and flattening himself against the wall. As he listened for footsteps, his heart was beating faster now, but he controlled it, focusing on the sound of the alien voices ahead. The patrol was just around the corner. If they spotted him now, his chance would be lost. He couldn't afford any mistakes. The alien soldiers walked past without noticing him, their heavy footfalls and low chatter filling the air. The soldier held his breath and waited until they had passed. Then he moved again in the opposite direction towards the control room. He had studied the ship's internal layout, enough to know that the central control room would be heavily guarded, but it was the heart of the ship, its command center, and it was there that he would find what he needed to disrupt their operations. He couldn't do it alone, but with the right information and tools he could make it happen. As he turned a corner, he saw the entrance to a security checkpoint. Up ahead, 2 alien guards stood at attention, their weapons flung across their shoulders, their eyes scanning the corridor with sharp precision. The soldier knew he couldn't just walk past them unnoticed, but he also knew that the aliens were arrogant and overconfident. Their belief in their superiority was their blind spot. He needed to use that to his advantage. He surveyed his surroundings quickly. There was a ventilation shaft above the checkpoint, just large enough for him to squeeze through. It was a long shot, but it was his best option. He didn't hesitate, climbing swiftly up the wall, using his training to scale the smooth surface. Without making a sound, when he reached the vent, he paused, listening carefully for any sign that the guards had heard him. The soldier moved swiftly through the ventilation ducts, his hands pressed against the cold metal walls as he navigated the maze of pipes and channels. His heart beat steadily in his chest, a rhythm of focus and determination. The air was thin here, a faint smell of metal and something alien that he couldn't place. It didn't matter. His mind was locked on the task ahead. The control room was just ahead, but he knew that getting there wasn't going to be easy. It would be heavily guarded, and the ship's internal systems would be on high alert once they realized a prisoner had escaped. He continued crawling through the ducts, his body tight and focused, avoiding making any unnecessary noise. The vents twisted and turned, and the further he went, the closer he could feel the pulse of the ship's heart. The central systems, the place where all decisions were made, the place where the alien commanders would oversee their campaign to destroy humanity. But it wasn't just their mission that the soldier intended to disrupt. It was their very existence aboard this ship that he planned to undo. As he neared the control room, he could hear voices, low murmurs in a language he still didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Confidence, arrogance, the sounds of the alien commanders thinking they were in complete control. The soldier ran through the ship's corridors, his mind racing faster than his legs could carry him. The ship was alive with chaos now. Sirens shrieked from every direction. Flashing lights bathed the halls in red as the alien crew scrambled to restore control. The emergency override had worked better than he'd hoped, throwing the ship into disarray and disrupting key systems just long enough to make the ship's crew forget about their arrogance. They had underestimated the human spirit, and now they were paying the price. But that didn't mean the soldier could afford to slow down. He was in enemy territory, and every second counted. He darted through a series of narrow hallways, taking sharp corners at full speed, his boots pounding against the metal floor. The ship's security was likely scrambling, the alarms a sign that they were already locking down everything they could. His mind quickly calculated his next move. There were 3 more hallways to cross before he reached the holding cells where the other human prisoners were being kept. He had a few options. He could fight his way through, risk getting captured again, or he could do what he did best. Be patient, find the blind spots, and exploit them. The decision was easy. He wasn't about to let anyone else suffer because of their captor's mistakes. His objective had shifted. He would free the prisoners and give them a fighting chance. Together, they might be able to launch a full assault on the ship, turning the tide for Earth. But to do that, he had to act fast and with precision. As he moved further down the hall, he slowed his pace, listening carefully for any approaching patrols. His heart was racing, but he kept his breathing steady, focusing on every sound in the corridor. There was a faint click to his left, the unmistakable sound of an alien guard tapping something into a console. The soldier quickly pressed his back to the wall and peered around the corner. 2 guards stood at attention, their attention focused on a keypad in front of a large reinforced door. Beyond it lay the prisoners. The soldier's mind whirred with options, but one thing was certain. He wasn't about to face these 2 head-on. He quickly surveyed the hall around him. The lighting was dim, and the shadows stretched long. There was a power conduit above the guards, barely visible unless you were looking for it. His heart beat in his throat as he decided he would have to climb. With a quiet exhale, he moved swiftly, scaling the wall in a series of quick, practiced movements. His boots scraped lightly against the metal, but it was enough to blend into the noise of the sirens. He reached the conduit above and pulled himself along it, moving silently until he was directly above the guards. The opening to the prisoner's chamber was just on the other side of the door. He crouched low, steadying himself as he planned his next move. He could hear the guards' voices growing louder as they argued over the malfunctioning systems. They hadn't noticed him yet. The soldier moved with the fluidity of a predator, slipping down from the conduit and into a crouch directly behind the two aliens. The first guard turned his head just as the soldier's hand slammed down on the back of his neck, knocking him unconscious with a precise strike. The second guard whipped around, but the soldier was already on him, his fist connecting with the alien's jaw in a stunning blow that sent him sprawling to the floor. Within seconds, both guards were incapacitated, their bodies crumpled on the cold floor. The soldier didn't waste a second. He moved to the door, his fingers dancing over the console with practiced speed. The code to the door was complex, but not impossible. He had spent enough time in the ship to figure out their security systems, and now he had a chance to use that knowledge. With a soft click, the door slid open, revealing the prisoners inside. They looked up at him, their faces a mixture of disbelief and hope. Their eyes were filled with the desperation of those who had been abandoned by the world they once knew. The soldier's expression softened as he held up a hand, signaling for them to stay quiet. The mission wasn't over yet. He turned to the group, his voice low but urgent. "We don't have much time. You need to follow me and stay quiet. We're getting off this ship." The prisoners nodded, and in that moment, the soldier knew the tide had turned. The aliens had mocked him, underestimated him, and now they would regret it. This ship, this symbol of their dominance, was about to be their downfall. And the soldier wasn't going to stop until it was over. He soldier motioned for the prisoners to follow as he led them out of the holding cell, moving quickly but quietly through the darkened hallways of the alien ship. The sirens still blared, but they had a new urgency now, the sound of panic spreading among the invaders. The ship was in chaos, and the alien forces were scrambling to regain control. But they had no idea what was coming for them. The soldier had already turned their overconfidence into their greatest vulnerability. He led the small group through the corridors with the precision of a commander, navigating the ship like a labyrinth. The prisoners, though weak from their captivity, followed closely behind, their faces a mixture of fear and newfound hope. The soldier had become their lifeline, their one chance to escape the nightmare they had been living in for so long. But they couldn't afford to slow down. Time was running out. They rounded a corner and paused, the soldier pressing himself against the wall to listen. His ears strained for any sign of approaching alien patrols. The quiet hum of the ship's malfunctioning systems filled the air, but the silence that followed was golden. The soldier motioned for them to move. He led them deeper into the heart of the ship, heading toward the docking bay. The path ahead was clear, but he knew that wouldn't last long. The aliens would have realized by now that their prisoner was free, and they would be closing in on him. There was no time to waste. As they reached the final stretch, he could see the massive doors of the docking bay ahead. But the alien ship's defenses were already in place. The soldier stopped just short of the bay entrance and signaled for the prisoners to stay put. He crept forward, carefully scanning the area. The bay was heavily guarded, but there was a chance, just one chance, that he could slip past undetected. He crouched low, watching the alien guards stationed at the control consoles, their backs to him as they focused on the chaos unfolding on the ship. They were too preoccupied with the ship's systems to notice him moving into position. The soldier silently moved toward a console near the entrance, his mind working quickly. The control panel was familiar to him now, A piece of alien technology, it had become just another part of the battlefield. His fingers flew over the keys, quickly accessing the ship's internal systems. The security protocols were stringent, but he had already disrupted so many of the ship's systems that bypassing this one was child's play. With a soft hiss, the docking bay doors began to open. The soldier looked back at the prisoners, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had made it this far. The doors slid open, revealing the waiting shuttles, a fleet of alien craft that the soldier would now turn into humanity's salvation. The prisoners moved forward, their steps hesitant at first, but as they saw the open bay and the ships that would carry them to safety, they quickened their pace. The soldier remained at the entrance, watching over them as they boarded the closest shuttle. The countdown to launch was already underway, and the bay was becoming a frenzied blur of movement as alien soldiers scrambled to intercept them. The soldier knew they wouldn't be able to stop him. He had already won. As the last prisoner boarded the shuttle, the soldier turned to face the oncoming threat. Alien soldiers appeared at the far end of the docking bay, weapons raised, their eyes blazing with fury. But the soldier wasn't worried. He had already outsmarted them at every turn. The alien forces were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The soldier sprinted toward the nearest shuttle, his pulse pounding, but his focus unshakable. As he reached the craft, the hatch slammed shut, and the engines roared to life. The ship's final defense came too late. The shuttle shot forward, breaking free of the alien mothership's grasp, leaving the broken invaders behind. The soldier watched through the viewports as the massive alien ship grew smaller and smaller in the distance, its once proud silhouette now a fading memory. Humanity had survived, and the galaxy would never forget the day it learned to never underestimate a human soldier again.